What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 3. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for this week's NFL slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 3. Let's take a final look here at each position. So at the quarterback position, the studs on the slate, you got Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Chicago Bears, who have the third worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes has averaged 22.9 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 6.5 rush attempts per game, going to be about 13% owned, projected at 27.7 fantasy points here in Week 3. He's $8,300 DraftKings salary, $900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, and they have the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 12.5. So an awful lot of points for the Kansas City Chiefs to score here in a good matchup. So I like Patrick Mahomes here versus the Chicago Bears. Okay, coming down in salary here, I also like Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Justin Herbert has averaged 23 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 3 rush attempts per game. Going to be about 8% owned, projected at 20.9 fantasy points here in Week 3. He's $7,500 DraftKings salary, $900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Chargers trailing by 1. So that's one of the reasons I like this pick. High scoring game here. Justin Herbert scored 25 and 21 fantasy points in the first 2 weeks. He got 1 and 5 rush attempts in those 2 games. Good matchup here, high scoring game, close competitive game. So I like Justin Herbert here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, coming down in salary once again, a great matchup here for Kirk Cousins from the Minnesota Vikings playing the LA Chargers, who have the worst defense overall, give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Kirk Cousins is averaging 27.5 fantasy points per game on the season. So off to the season, had a great start here, and he's getting about 1.5 rush attempts per game. Doesn't rush the ball much, and he's going to be about 15% owned, projected at 20.2 fantasy points here in Week 3. He's $6,900 DraftKings salary, $900 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Vikings favored by 1. So you got a fantastic matchup and a hot start for Kirk Cousins. And his salary is relatively low here, under $7K on DK. Only $900 more on FanDuel, so I like that price on both sites. So I like Kirk Cousins here versus the LA Chargers. Okay, moving on to the running back position. Stud on the slate, I like Tony Pollard from the Dallas Cowboys playing the Arizona Cardinals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Tony Pollard, he's averaging 21.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 19.5 rush attempts per game and 5.5 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 24% owned. Now, he's been on the field for 64% of the snaps, but clearly his usage rate, his touch rate is 54%. So 54% of the time when he's on the field, he's touching the ball. His snap count, 64%, but he's getting a ton of touches. He got, 33 touches last week. So Tony Pollard projected at 18 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 8,000 DraftKings salary, which does look a little bit low if he's going to be touching the ball that many times. Could be a workhorse back this year. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43 points scored in this game, with the Cowboys favored by 12.5. So that could be a running game script for Tony Pollard, and it's a decent matchup. He's off to a hot start, and I think he's still underpriced. I think he might trend up towards over 9K. So I like Tony Pollard here versus the Arizona Cardinals. Okay, another running back that I like coming down in salary here. I've picked him every single week so far. He had one good week. Next week wasn't so good, but I think he's still got some opportunity, and it might just be me because I picked him twice already. And he's got a good matchup, and his salary hasn't really changed. So, I like Travis Etienne from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Houston Texans, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Now, Travis Etienne averaging 13.8 fantasy points per game on the season. He's getting an average of 15 rush attempts per game and 4 pass targets per game. Going to be about 17% owned on the field for 76% of the snaps. Projected at 15.4 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 6,900 DraftKings salary, 1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Jacksonville Jaguars favored by 8. So I like Travis Etienne in a good matchup here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, everyone, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is UNC's Finest. Congratulations, UNC Finest. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, coming down in salary even more here. I like Raheem Mostert from the Miami Dolphins playing the Denver Broncos, who have the 9th worst defense overall, give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. So Raheem Mostert, he's averaging 20.9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 14 rush attempts per game and 1.5 pass targets per game. It's going to be about 10% owned on the field for 73% of the snaps. Projected at 13.9 fantasy points here in week 3. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 48 points scored in this game, with the Dolphins favored by 6.5. So a lot that I like about this pick. Good matchup, high scoring game, close competitive game, favoring the Dolphins in that running game script. And Raheem Mostert got 18 rush attempts and 1 pass target last week. So we'll see if he can get close to 20 touches here in week 3. So I like Raheem Mostert here versus the Denver Broncos. Okay, one more pick here. If you want to go save a little bit more salary at running back, and I think maybe a little bit more risk here, but it is a better matchup, and it's early in the season, so you never know what you're going to get. So I like Miles Sanders from the Carolina Panthers playing the Seattle Seahawks, who have the second worst defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Miles Sanders has averaged 10.3 fantasy points per game on the season. Now, I like this pick because he's getting an average of 16 rush attempts per game, 5.5 pass targets per game, so over 20 touches a game, and he's going to be about 16% owned. Now, he's on the field for 59% of the snaps, but he's touching the ball 53% of the time when he's on the field. He's projected at 13.3 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $5,700 DraftKings salary, $1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42 points scored in this game, with the Panthers trailing by 5.5. So I do prefer Raheem Mostert, but if you need to save a little bit of salary or just want to change it up in some lineups, I like Miles Sanders here versus the Seattle Seahawks. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So there's 3 studs in the slate with good matchups here. Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. I like all those guys. Now, Stephon Diggs does look a little underpriced at only $8,100 DraftKings salary and actually $100 less on FanDuel. So Stephon Diggs definitely stands out as a value play stud wide receiver. Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, over 9K on DK. So yeah, those 3 studs. Want to save some salary on a stud pick. I like Stephon Diggs. So moving down in salary here, I also like Keenan Allen from the LA Chargers playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing wide receivers. Keenan Allen has averaged 24.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.5 pass targets per game and 1 rush attempt per game. Going to be about 19% owned. He's been on the field for 93% of the snaps, projected at 16.9 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $7,600 DraftKings salary, $1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Chargers trailing by 1. So, that's a pretty good game here for Keenan Allen. Now, you got Keenan Allen at $7,600, and you got Stephon Diggs at $8,100. So I would kind of flip between those two as my value play stud. So Keenan Allen scored 34 and 14 fantasy points in the last 2 games off of 10 and 9 pass targets. And I believe the running back is injured or going to be out. So I think Keenan Allen could be set up here for a passing game script in a high-scoring game. So I like Keenan Allen here versus the Minnesota Vikings.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, now moving down in salary, a value play that I like is Amari Cooper from the Cleveland Browns playing the Tennessee Titans, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the second most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Amari Cooper averaging 11.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.5 pass targets per game. And he's going to be about 7% owned. He's been on the field for 68% of the snaps. Now, he was questionable, I think, in week 2, but he is at full strength. He got 10 pass targets last week, scored 16 fantasy points, projected at 13.8 fantasy points here in week 3. Only $5,700 DraftKings salary, $500 more on FanDuel. Now, Vegas does think this is going to be a low-scoring game. 39.5 points scored in this game. They have the Browns favored by 3.5.
but I like Amari Cooper as a value play and a guy who might see 10 targets again in this game at only $5,700 DraftKings salary and $500 more on FanDuel. I think he's got value play written all over him with monster upside at only 7% ownership. So I like Amari Cooper here versus the Tennessee Titans. Okay, moving on to the tight end position here. Stud picks that I like. You got Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, Mark Andrews. So let's go over a couple of those guys. So Travis Kelce, he's $7,200 DraftKings salary, $800 more on FanDuel. You know what you're getting with Travis Kelce. Fantastic quarterback throwing in the ball. But he's he's expensive. So, you're paying like a wide receiver salary for a tight end. So just keep that in mind. But he is averaging 12.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9 pass targets per game. Going to be about 15% owned. And he's only been on the field for 33% of the snaps, so I do think that's a little bit concerning. But he did get the ball 21 or touch the ball 21% of the time when he was on the field. So it's a high touch rate, low snap count. But it's Travis Kelce. He can put up monster numbers. He's a guy that 7,200 that can put up 25 plus fantasy points and kind of break the slate. I mean, he can put up 3 touchdowns. Anyways, so Travis Kelce, you know who that is. Let's move on from that. TJ Hawkinson. Now, this is a guy a little bit under the radar here. He's $6,500 DraftKings salary. Hold on, he's from the Minnesota. I'm getting ahead of myself. TJ Hawkinson from the Minnesota Vikings playing the LA Chargers, who have the worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Now, TJ Hawkinson has averaged 18.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.5 pass targets per game. Going to be about 9% owned. And what stands out here is he's on the field for 80% of the snaps, and he does touch the ball 17% of that time. So those numbers are fantastic. So TJ Hawkinson projected at 13.1 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $6,500 DraftKings salary. He's 1,000 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 54 points scored in this game, with the Vikings favored by 1. Now, TJ Hawkinson scored 26 and 12 fantasy points in the last 2 weeks off of 8 and 9 pass targets. And it does look like he's going to be a target monster for Kirk Cousins. And you got a stack opportunity there as well. So I like TJ Hawkinson here versus the LA Chargers. Okay, coming down in salary, another stud tight end is Mark Andrews from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Indianapolis Colts, who have the 5th worst defense overall, middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Now, Mark Andrews has averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game on the season. It looks like he missed week 1, played week 2, got 8 pass targets. He's going to be about 13% owned, and he's projected at 13.6 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $6,000 DraftKings salary, $1,400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44 points scored in this game. They have the Ravens favored by 8. So I think his price is right. He does have a lot of upside, can get you 20 plus fantasy points. So I like Mark Andrews here versus the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, now coming way down in salary here, if you want some value play tight ends, take a look at Evan Ingram from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Houston Texans, who have a middle of the pack defense overall, give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Now, Evan Ingram averaging 10.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.5 pass targets per game, and he's going to be about 5% owned, on the field for 74% of the snaps, projected at 10.6 fantasy points here in week 3. He's $4,800 DraftKings salary, $1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Jaguars favored by 8. So good matchup here, and it looks like he got 8 pass targets last week for 12 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points on 5 pass targets the week before that. So getting volume in a good matchup. So I like Evan Ingram here versus the Houston Texans. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again and good luck.